Whom the Gods Fear, by J. Wdowski. Chapter 6. The conference was attended by the same group that had attended the first meeting, with the addition of Lieutenant Commander Poldovski, the chief engineer, and minus the first officer who was on bridge duty. Captain Rubel was actually a very close friend of Captain Demi's. Glenn had even thought of offering Rubel the command of the venture. Glenn considered Rubel a friend, but had always a much closer relationship with Demi. Rubel felt the same towards Glenn, but was much closer to Demi than Glenn was. Captain Demi had movie star looks and a magnetic personality to match. He made everyone around him feel good. Everyone who met him had a very strong desire to befriend him. Women found him irresistible. They all knew he was a playboy, going from woman to woman, yet they all fooled themselves to think they would be the ones to tame him. None ever did. Demi at 56 never married, and had never even lived with a woman. He had told Glenn once that even though it was easy for him to pick up women, he actually preferred hiring a professional. He explained that he did not pay them for sex. He paid them to go away. Demi's good looks and charms were so powerful many a professional girl did not want to leave him either, no matter how much money he offered them to leave. Captain Rubel, although intelligent with a dry wit, was much more aloof, judgmental, and snobbish. He had the arrogance one would imagine of a British noble at the height of the Victorian era. Demi was perhaps the only person he thought more of than himself. When Glenn did choose Demi to captain the venture, Rubel found it a reasonable and correct choice. Who best to deal with the Chinese than Thomas Demi on the first ever interstellar trade agreement? Now that Demi was missing on a mission that Glenn had sent him on, Rubel blamed Glenn for Demi's disappearance. He had never respected Glenn as much as he respected Demi. Now his respect for Glenn was deteriorating daily, especially due to Glenn allowing Rebecca Stern to join the mission. Glenn was not the only one she had been badgering about her perceived unbearable substandard living conditions on board the Polo. Particle rail cannons or not, the Polo is no match to the Chinese coastal defense ships. Rubel described the strength of the Marco Polo to the Chinese interplanetary warships. The term coastal referred to ships without hyper-engine technology. Even with our military upgrades, this is still not a warship. Our armor is only 12 centimeters of ceramic spider fiber. I thought it also had self-healing nanotechnology, questioned Dr. Verne. It does, making it ideal for micrometer hits and even warm laser hits. But the Chinese, from my understanding, have much more powerful weapons than low-grade chemical lasers. Captain Rubel replied, I need some type of insurance that if we pop into their system, they don't just pop us right out of existence. The captain is correct. We are not completely sure of their firepower capabilities or the defensive properties of their ship's armor. The only known advantage we know we have is our hyperdrive technology, which is flawed with over 24 hours cool and reset time, stated Commander Granite. Meaning if we find ourselves jumping into a firefight, we cannot just jump out of it again. Jen clarified. Aye, sir, Captain Rubel confirmed. You are all assuming, once again, the worst behavior on the part of the Chinese. I feel you are all only projecting your own hostile personalities unjustly upon them. Rebecca scolded them. They know we are coming. Glenn ignored Rebecca's input. I have ensured my Chinese contacts that we do not have any hostile intentions. So, hopefully we won't be jumping into a firefight. No, perhaps we will only be jumping into a trap. Rubel responded, I fear we won't last long enough for a firefight. Maybe we shouldn't jump right near their home world. And Hogan suggested, perhaps we should jump in just at the edge of their system and make contact with them first, before making a final jump to their home world. Kind of like knocking on their front door, not just appearing in their living room. Glenn said. Yes, Dr. Hogan replied. At that distance we could use conventional radio waves to contact their home world. The communication delay would be hours instead of years. On sublight engines we can move in closer to their home world. Granite suggested. That could take months. Rubel replied. I am aware of that. Once we do get a welcoming reply, we can make a final jump near their home world. Wouldn't this delay our rescuing Captain Demi and his crew if the Chinese do have them? Dr. Verne questioned. If we are destroyed on the outset of our arriving in the Xing system, I am pretty confident that would delay their rescue even further. Dr. Hogan pointed out. Coughing lightly, Lieutenant Commander Poldovski got the group's attention. There is one other thing that I think we might be able to try to ensure our safety. Poldovski spoke with his heavy Slavic accent, a combination of Polish, Ukrainian, and Russian. I have been thinking about something. I would appreciate Dr. Vern's educated opinion. As we all know, Dr. Tilson's theory of gravitational mechanics has given us the D-mass generator. By his discovery of the cause of the force of gravity at the subatomic level, and his in turn discovering. Poldovski, we don't need a physics lesson. What is your point? His captain interrupted. Sorry, Captain. My point is that his discovery gave us the hyper-engines with the D-mass generation's blockage of gravitational mechanics. Is also the primary force for artificial gravity aboard today's starships and space stations. We all know that already, Lieutenant Commander. What is your point? My apologies again, Captain. My point is, why couldn't we use the D-mass generator not to block the force of gravity, but reverse it? Much like an electric motor can reverse a magnet from positive to negative. If my theory is correct, we could create a negative gravitational force. We could be repelling objects, not attracting them. Einstein theories were proven that gravity even affects light, that it can bend light towards it. Why couldn't a negative force of gravity push light away from it? Like a laser beam or even subatomic energy weapon? Granite asked. A force field. Glenn stated. Poldovski vigorously nodded yes to both questions. A force field? Are you insane? That's just science fiction. Rebecca responded. It could work. Dr. Vern smiled, Mr. Poldovski, you should win the Nobel Prize in Physics. If we redirect the energy flow around the ship instead of through it, and reverse gravitational mechanics, it should work. You're saying this crazy idea could work? Questioned Captain Rubel. I only wish I had thought of it. It is so simple, I am surprised no one has thought of it before, including Tilson himself. It should work. It should repel anything fired at the ship, including energy weapons. You think we can really do this? In deep space? Glenn asked Dr. Vern. The physicist grinned even wider. Yes, we can. We should be able to create a reverse gravity field around the ship. The only drawback I see is that as long as we use the D-mass generator as a repelling shield, it will delay our ability that much longer for the D-mass generator to cool down and reset for any hyperjumps. There are two other limitations I predict. Poldovski added, the first is that we will be limited by our ability to generate enough energy to actually repel particles and/or energy. If they throw too much at us, we may not be able to generate enough of a repelling force to repel everything. And the second drawback? Asked Glenn. Blindness. Blindness? Questioned Captain Rubel. Yes, of course. Dr. Vern answered, understanding Poldovski's meaning. If we are able to generate a field that will repel lasers and other energy weapons, we would also at the same time be repelling all forms of light. Microwaves, X-rays, ultraviolet, infrared, and even visual light. In other words, no sensors. If we are repelling all energy waves and beams away from the ship, our sensors, even our naked eyes, will not be receiving any information about the space around us. Glenn stated for confirmation. Yes, exactly. As long as we are repelling light energy weapons, we will also be repelling the benign light energies our sensors and our eyes use to see the space around us. We would be, as Lieutenant Commander Poldovski stated, blinding ourselves. Dr. Vern confirmed. Meaning, we would not want to use this all the time. Clearly, Mr. Yeager, we wouldn't. Especially if we want to be able to sense our surrounding and engage in a hyper-jump. There is an answer to that problem. Poldovski spoke. In World War I, the first fighter planes had their machine guns mounted on the noses of their planes for better aim. Since their propellers were also mounted on the noses for thrust, they would end up shooting up their own propellers. They first tried armor plating the propeller blades, but often it would end up reflecting the machine gun bullets back at the pilots. Finally, they came up with a bright idea of connecting the firing pins of the machine guns to the propeller. That way, the machine guns would automatically not fire whenever a propeller blade was in front of the barrel. They sync the machine guns to only fire in between the high-speed, rotating blades. How does that help us? Asked Rubel. We can alternate the repelling field to allow us to see with our sensors in between any strikes against us from the enemy. We could even connect the repelling shield to the sensors to automatically be triggered when projectiles or energy weapons are incoming. But if the sensors are blinded by the repelling shield, how would they know when to trigger off the shields so we can see again? By the energy demand requirements of the D-mass generator. Poldovski answered Glenn. As long as the shields are repelling, they will demand more energy from the fusion reactor. A drop in that demand will automatically drop the repelling shield. Yes, brilliant. As long as the shields are not repelling projectiles or energy weapons, the demand for power will decrease. The ship's computer could then determine the threat is past, shutting down the repelling shield. If new threats are incoming, the sensors would inform the ship's computer to re-trigger the repelling shield. Much like the old World War I fighter planes connected their propellers to the machine guns. Dr. Verne explained further. This solution, of course, would not address the problem of delaying our ability to engage a hyper jump, added Poldovski. Beats getting blown up, stated Commander Granite. I agree. Can you both really make this happen? Out here, not in a dry dock. Yes. Poldovski and Verne simultaneously answered. In the future, on larger starship designs, it would be reasonable to install 2 D-mass generators. Poldovski stated. Wait, there is one thing I think we are all forgetting. Asked Captain Rubel, what about the 90-second time limit of running the D-mass generator? It should not apply when using it to generate the shield. Poldovski answered. The reason there is the 90-second duration limit when we make a hyperjump is due to the fact that when the generator is demassing, the ship is also demassing itself, added Dr. Verne. So, Captain Rubel, the D-mass generator actually does not operate for 90 seconds. It only operates for 1,000th of a second, and within that time it is able to demass the entire ship, us, and itself. The effect luckily holds for at least 90 seconds, allowing the hyperengines to hurl us 5.5 light years. Since the generator will not be demassing itself when creating the repellent shield, it should be able to do so indefinitely. Dr. Verne said. That is, as long as the cold fusion reactor is able to power it. Poldovski pointed out. All sounds good to me. How long do you think it will take to make the modifications? Glenn asked. Dr. Verne and Poldovski looked at each other and then both looked at Glenn. I think we should have it done, right before our last jump to the Xing system. Dr. Verne answered, while Poldovski nodded in agreement. Okay then, let's do it. Poldovski and Verne work on the modification for the repellent shield. Captain Rubel set a new course that will bring us just at the edge of their system, perhaps near the orbit of their outermost planet, Xing 7. Sound good? Aye, sir, Captain Rubel responded as he then glanced at Poldovski. You heard your orders, Lieutenant Commander. Aye, sir. Poldovski stood at attention, acknowledging his captain's order.